All right, we're taping this on Tuesday morning. So if anything happens NBA-wise between now and when you hear it, I apologize. Jackie MacMullan is here. A lot of NBA news. First of all, we had the last game of the previous round was on a Sunday night, and then we had this nice little buffer until the finals, which is fun because now we can talk about legacies.
Right.
You kind of hope some NBA news happens. Then the Clippers just dropped a bomb.
Yeah.
With the Doc Rivers thing, which I know you've been talking about on the ESPN outlets, but I was surprised. I thought it was one of those things that if it happened, it was going to happen within the first 72, 96 hours, whatever.
Right.
What do you think changed over the last week and a half?
Well, I don't know. And I got a text from Doc at 3:00 in the morning, my time last night. So I didn't get a chance to talk to him yet. I hope to. But I'm just this is a guess, an educated guess. Ballmer's a bottom line guy, right? He's a hard line businessman, bottom line guy. I think there was always reservations about Doc because we saw him lose some of his power anyway under Ballmer. There was that 3-1 lead that was lost under Ballmer, the first one.
Yep.
So I just think there's been reticence all along with him because I think Ballmer looks at things pragmatically as a business owner and not emotionally. I'm an emotional person that makes emotional decisions, which is why I'd be a horrible coach. I would never be a good coach for that reason. And so I don't know if it's just over the next few days. I'm assuming they had meetings. And again, this is just an educated guess that Ballmer said, talk me out of this. And Doc wasn't able to,
Right.
So the other thing I wonder about, one other thing I wonder about, Bill, is did he talk to players? Was there a message from the players that we weren't expecting? Because I always think as Doc, as a champion of players and players responding very highly to Doc, was there a message in there? And again, this is pure conjecture on my part. I don't know. I don't know the answer yet. We'll find out very soon, I'm sure.
So that was my first reaction when I heard about this, because I just don't think NBA franchises make moves without consulting either their best player or their best two players, depending on who it is. Like when the Lakers were getting rid of Luke Walton last year, I promise you they asked LeBron what he thought. And this goes back,
Wait a minute. I'm going to stop you right there.
Yeah.
All year long, LeBron and Rich Paul were saying we got to get rid of Luke Walton.
Right.
Come on now. They didn't have to ask him. They told us unsolicited.
But this goes back 40 years because I just read Jeff Pearlman's 2 Laker books, including Showtime, which I'd already read, but I read again.
Right.
And then I was reading Pat Riley's book as well that he wrote in 87. Magic was the first time this happened, where Magic's friendly with Jerry Buss. He's unhappy. He starts talking. And the next thing you know, Paul Westhead is out. So we have a 40-year history of this. And my guess is they gave up so much for Kawhi and Paul George. And they went all in for this 2-year window. They blew the first year. Something was clearly wrong with this team all year. And we were looking at them going, well, yeah, they have an on-off switch. It's weird. It's weird. They're acting like champions when they haven't won anything yet. The load management thing was weird. Then we had the pandemic. But we always thought, well, on paper, this is the most talented team. They never figured it out. And my guess is Ballmer had to have talked to those guys because that's how the NBA works, right? And then they didn't stick up for him.
Okay, but here's my question. If you're Ballmer and you just watched what you watched, do you even care what they think?
True.
I mean, really? And you're like, what the heck is wrong with you guys? That would be my first question. And then if they said, well, the coach this, the coach that, how much credibility do you give them? That's my only question. And I do think this, I'm kind of hard on Paul George for obvious reasons, I think, and he really disappeared in that series against Denver. But the more I hear, the more I talk to people who are exiting the bubble and have now been out of the bubble a week or two, and I'm hoping to report this in full, really flush it out, is it was just tough in there, and it wasn't for everybody. And people, it really affected players adversely, severely, adversely. And I think Paul George, he said he was one of them. I'm not even talking out of school here. Paul George said himself, he was, struggling with it, depressed, felt some depression. So I just think the bubble has had a major impact on some of the biggest players in the game. And some of it's been positive. A guy like Jimmy Butler, he's like, bring it on. That's his personality. Yeah, this is tough. Awesome. Give me more. I think LeBron James, to a certain degree, has been like that.
Yeah.
So I almost feel now a little bad a few days out from being so tough on Paul George because I'm a believer that mental health is a real thing. It's the same thing as a sprained ankle or a ripped shoulder. and maybe we should pause and give this a little more attention. So for what that's worth.
That's fair, because I think what we've learned from the bubble, not just with sports, but in real life, is it exacerbates whatever problems are probably bubbling underneath the surface. Like if you have some couple you're friends with that have a rocky relationship and now they're stuck together for 7 months.
Yeah, not good.
It might not be great. I think this Clippers team, it was a weird mix the whole time. They were thrown together. And it made me think, like, how many times has this worked where we've created the super team and we've thrown dudes together and crossed our fingers and hoped it worked? I mean, because the Miami situation was so unique. They had LeBron, who's one of the 3 best players of all time, at the peak of his powers during that, along with Wade, who at least in 2011 was a top 3 guy, and Bosh. And the league's a little diluted at that point, and they end up making 4 straight finals and winning 2 titles. It doesn't always work out that way. Especially when you throw teams together, you go back over NBA history, usually it's rocky that first year.
Well, that's my point. And that's why I'm surprised Ballmer did this, because I get that Doc has been with the Clippers 7 years, but he's been with this team 1 year. And isn't the whole idea, let's run it back and see what they've learned. Let's see what I've learned. Let's take the hurt from this experience, the criticism from this experience, and come back and win it because of it. And that's what happened with LeBron and the Heat. That's exactly what happened. I mean, LeBron says all the time, it was the turning point of his career.
Yeah. So,
because he had to go home and say, okay, so why, so that's why I think if I'm Ballmer, I would have given Doc 1 more year. I would have given them all 1 more year to learn from this hurt, from this devastation, from this underachieving. I mean, with a capital U. And what are you made of? And what are you going to do about it?
I think a big part of this was the situation Ballmer walked into with Doc, where, and I've had season tickets for the Clippers since 2004. And when the Sterling
my condolences.
Thank you. When the Sterling thing went down in 2014, and not only was all of a sudden, he eventually ends up selling the team, but you have that, but you also have the executives that were attached to him. Right. They lose their power, all this stuff. And there was this crazy power vacuum where the organization itself, I'm talking like ticket guys, ticket ladies, marketing people, all of them were like, who the fuck are we working for?
Right.
And by all accounts, and it's documented at the time, it was what I heard, like Doc was absolutely amazing in that situation and became kind of the guy for the Clippers. And that's how he ended up getting the GM coach power, which fundamentally, if we've learned anything from the 2010s, nobody should have those 2 jobs at the same time. But I think Ballmer walks into that. He doesn't know anything about basketball. He's a successful businessman. Doc has this oversized power over the franchise, and rightly so, because all the stuff he did. And he kind of trusts him. And he's like, all right, you do everything. Yeah. I'm going to listen to you. And Ballmer's on record 2 years ago as saying that was a huge mistake. I shouldn't have done that. I should have built a front office. So I wonder year by year if he lost confidence in Doc, especially because they never made a conference finals. So at some point you look at it and you are who you are.
Right. And all that's true. And listen, Doc's the first to admit he's got to take some responsibility for what happened. I mean, it was just one of the biggest colossal collapses. I don't know. Is it hyperbole to say in NBA history? Because it feels a little bit like that.
It's not hyperbole.
No, I don't think it is either. So does Doc hold some responsibility for that? Of course he does. Absolutely. But I guess I just thought with his credibility, with his credentials, and the fact that Kawhi and Paul George wanted to play for him, that's why they went to LA. And that was, if you believe everything we've read and heard, that was one of the tipping points. You have Doc. That's why we're coming.
Yeah.
So what has changed in this calendar year? I don't know the answer to that. And what can we criticize Doc for? He went with Montrezl Harrell too long. There's plenty of X and O's things. And but as one of his confidants and friends said to me, so you're going to criticize a coach for believing in a guy a little too much. Well, yeah, that's the landscape we're in. I don't know if Ballmer's just saying, all right, this guy, I need someone that's cutthroat like me, or cutthroat, all business, like X's and O's, bottom line. That's what I need. So I don't really know the answer, but I will say this. When you go back and look at the history of firing coaches after they've had these 55-win seasons, it doesn't really work out that well for the next guy. It doesn't. Now, this team is, my goodness, on a platter. But I always think back to, like, we talk about super teams, putting together super teams that didn't work. I always think about that Lakers team that imported Karl Malone and Gary Payton and all those guys. And on paper, that should have just been unbelievable. But meanwhile, Kobe and Shaq are being separated because they're going to hit each other at a huge, Shaq's going to kill him. And I guess in Jeff's book, which I can't wait to read, there was a pickup game where he did actually hit him. But, I remember reporting from, I forget which book I did, that there was this big meeting where it was after Kobe went to Jim Gray and gave him that interview and pretty much was passive aggressively just killing Shaq. And Shaq's like, I'm going to murder him with my bare hands. And,
right.
and Peyton and Malone and Brian Shaw, they got to go down there and literally stop this from happening. So in a perfect world, that team should have been amazing. And it wasn't. And it was, think of the Hall of Famers on that team. So.
And that's happened a lot over the years. Yeah, you make a good point about the next guy, because we saw that in Boston with Casey Jones. You were covering that team.
Yeah,
who the last couple of years we're all complaining about. And won't play rookies, didn't play Reggie Lewis in 88.
Right.
The offense is too stale. We keep blowing leads at the end and pick them apart. And then the Celtics after the 88 playoffs are like, yeah, his time has come and gone.
Right.
We're going to promote Jimmy Rogers. And it was a disaster.
Oh my God, the biggest
Jimmy
disaster.
Rogers.
Yeah. And I always say that when people talk about the assistant coaches, these great assistant coaches, and Jimmy Rogers might be one of the greatest assistant coaches of all time, for real. I mean, the players trusted him. They believed in him. He worked with them. He could challenge them. And then he just went 6 inches over to the left to be the head coach. And his physical appearance changed. I mean, he had blotchy skin. Like the pressure for him, for whatever reason, was a problem. And he's just one of the finest men I know, Jimmy Rogers. I can't say enough nice things about him. But when he became the head coach, he became a different person. And that happens a lot. And that's why I'm always watching Ty Lue, and I'm like, man, that dude is consistent. Doesn't matter if he's in that seat or that seat, or as a player. Like, he is just the same everywhere he is. So, maybe he's Ballmer's guy. Maybe he is. I don't know.
I wonder if there's a 6-7 year shelf life with any coach, with the obvious exception of Popovich. But even you look at Riley, by the 89 Lakers season, the Lakers had tuned out Riley completely, and he's one of the 4 best coaches of all time. Doc's there great. 7 years.
Could be. But
and also,
think about it. But the personnel changed so dramatically in that 7 years. It's not like you're talking to the same player. Like in Boston, when you had Bird, Parrish, McHale. I mean, one of the problems, just out injuries that McHale, Bird, just to a lesser degree, Parrish, they all just fell apart physically. But the other thing was they were together a really, really long time. And they went through different coaches. Fitch, I mean, there was a mutiny to get rid of Fitch that Bird wasn't part of. And really, I'm not sure he ever forgave his teammates that were part of that. He still says Bill Fitch is the best coach he ever had.
Yeah.
So, you go through those longevity. That's one thing. But these guys were together like 12 minutes.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Well, one other thing, I personally thought he did a terrible job in the bubble playoffs. Like, I thought that Denver series, if you just remove everything else, you just be like, was that a fireable series for a coach? My answer would be yes. I thought they were more talented, and I thought Denver just outwitted them the whole time. But where it gets tough with Doc, and I had a couple of people text me this yesterday in the league, and I'm sure you did too, he has outsized importance in the league. As a leader, as a respected Black voice, and with the coaching community. I mean, he's probably, him and Popovich are the 2 most important guys. And I think the general consensus was like, we can't lose Doc from the league. Like, somebody else has to hire him. And it seems like, from everything I'm hearing, we're taping this, it's like 8:00 in the morning, my time right now. It seems like Philly, if they can make a deal, that's going to be the team. That's a really interesting situation for him to walk into, right? You have this weird Embiid Simmons thing. Right. It's this clumsy kind of roster. And if anything, I think that's pretty risky for him. What do you think about him in Philly?
I just think because I've seen him do it, he'll hypnotize Embiid and Ben Simmons. He'll take them to an art museum or to on a duck boat. Do they have duck boats in Philadelphia? I don't know.
Probably somewhere.
I don't know. They couldn't possibly be like the swan boats in Boston. But anyway, he'll find something to do to bring these guys together, because that's what he's really good at. And he'll talk about, I just know Doc's a lifer. Feels like a lifer to me. Maybe he needs a break. Maybe it'd be good for him to take a year and just catch his breath, because he'd only be that more sought after and more valuable if he does. I think there'll be plenty of teams interested in him. I'm sure Philly is. And if Ty Lue becomes the new Clippers coach, that takes him out of that mix. Although we keep hearing D'Antoni anyway. It's a very interesting. If I'm Doc, I'm just taking the year off, man. I'm just going to take a year off and take stock of what just happened. What's my role in it?
He's getting
how much
paid.
culpability I have. Yeah. Just take a year. Just take a year and just catch my breath. Now, there's been a lot of coaches fired, as you know, in the last few weeks. I've talked to almost all of them. I talked to one yesterday. And he's like, my son keeps saying, that narrows it down to coaches who have sons. Why you want to keep doing this? We have all the security we need. We love you. You've accomplished so much. Anybody that becomes an NBA coach has accomplished so much. Like, why do you want to keep doing this? Just take a time for yourself. Like, you look horrible. Just give yourself a break. Get yourself some rest. Get yourself fit. Like, just cool it, And so, doesn't that apply to Doc in some ways? He's got grandchildren now. Like, just take a year. I don't know if he's listening. Take a year, Doc. Take a year, man.
It's a brilliant move.
Figure this out, and you'll be more sought after than ever. And you can sit back and watch whether the Clippers win it all or they don't. I don't know. I just think, but I understand the mentality, and so do you, because we're the same. I mean, we can't live without this game. It's ridiculous. I wish I had other hobbies. I do have some, but none of them overtake me the way this does. Like, I can't live without basketball.
The move is to take a year off. I don't think he will, because we've seen it over and over again. Your stock just goes up, especially like he'll do TV for a year. He'll be amazing. Right. He was one of the best TV color guys we've had. Like, it's basically him and Steve Kerr, I think, were the two best.
Kerr was amazing too. Yeah.
So he does that for a year. The question for me is, like, so the two available jobs, and I've heard Houston's going after him pretty hard too, and that's been reported.
Right.
I wouldn't go near Houston because I think that's loserville. You're never winning a title with that team. Philly, I could see I could see him sitting on the deck at his house in Malibu, wherever he is, just kind of looking on the ocean, thinking about Embiid.
Right.
Oh man, if I could get Embiid in shape, if I could reach Embiid, that team has so much talent. I really want to prove that I can get back to the finals. Like, this might actually light a fire under him. So that Philly job's a tough job to turn down, as weird as that roster is.
Why don't I just take a year to figure out what the best job is for me? Not to grab the next job to validate myself. I don't need validation. Everybody knows where I stand in the hierarchy of things. Why should I put myself through this? Because if it doesn't work in Philly, now you're sort of one of those guys like, I don't know how many more chances do I get? Like, it's crazy to say that.
But that's his fourth team.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind
of... Or whatever his next team is. He had Orlando, who's in Boston for a while.
Right.
And then the 7 years with the Clippers. I'm sorry, that's going to be tough on his resume. Like,
of course it is. Yeah, he knows that.
Not ever making a conference finals. Oof.
Yeah, and you don't think he doesn't know that? So if Doc is smart, he'll take a look at that view from his deck. We're assuming he has a nice teak deck. I bet he has somebody else stain it for him. We stain our own deck. It's a messy job, I'm just going to tell you. I think he should just say, you know what? Standing pat. I'm standing pat. He won't. I don't think he will, but he should.
Let's talk about another team that's reeling right now, the Celtics. I want to talk about the finals in a second, but so that Celtics series and the Celtics playoff run, I said this probably a month ago on this pod. I felt like everybody thinks of them as a young team. Oh, this is the first of many chances. First of all, they've been in 3 conference finals in 4 years. I felt like the window in a lot of ways was now, because you have this great contract situation. Tatum's not even a max player yet. You've had all these draft picks. You have a situation where Milwaukee, who's in Philly, who are your two biggest rivals going into the season, are both exterminated before we even get to round 3.
100%.
On the West, you have this weird Lakers team that's really a 2-man team. And it was just sitting there for them. And I went from being like, man, what an amazing year. The conference finals.
Right, exactly.
Such a jump from last year with Kyrie. It was so unhappy. I really took that loss hard as a fan, because I was like, man, it was just sitting there. And I feel like Miami just outfought them. And they win 3 of the 4 games, basically by in the fourth quarter being tougher, by coming through in big moments, by outwitting the Celts definitely outcoaching them. I think this one's going to sting. I don't feel like this was like a cool, we made the conference finals. The more I'm thinking about it, I'm like, man, you only have so many windows at these, and they blew it.
And it's funny. If I had said to you before the playoffs started, or this season, let's say before the season started, if I said to you, yeah, the Celtics are going to lose in 6 games in the conference finals, you'd be like, I'll take that, because they're going to lose to the Bucks and it's a bad matchup and Giannis is, Adonis, and it's all good. But you're right. This landscape is completely different. And I didn't like, and maybe it's just players speak, but I didn't like what I heard after they lost. Like right after the loss, I wanted to hear, we need to be tougher. We need to be better. And I heard, this was an amazing year. I love my teammates. And I was like, whoa, really? I mean, I get that because their future is still really, really good. They don't have to, unlike some of these other teams like the Sixers who have to decide like schematically, like we don't work. Do we send one of the big two? Like they don't have any of those kind of decisions. Their only thing is, Gordon Hayward's going to pick up his option. You're going to pay Jason Tatum the max. You have to decide whether you keep Shemi Ojeleye, which I'm pretty sure they won't. You're going to pick up Daniel Tice's, whatever it is, $5 million. Or, I mean, it's low money. Oh, that's Cantor. I mean, I think his money's even lower. So you don't.
Both of them are their option.
Right. So these are low level decisions in many ways, unless you decide we can't play positionless basketball. We have to have at least one dominant big. Then you have some big decisions to make. But so to me, it was like, you see Miami, and I have so much respect for Miami. I had them before the season started. I totally misjudged some of their talent. I felt like I was way off. They're much better. They're much smarter. They're I know, they're going to be well coached with Spoelstra. So you look at this and it's just like, how? Because if it was just a matter of talent and Miami was better. Miami deserved to win. Let's be clear. The right team won for all the right reasons.
Totally agree.
They were tougher. They were more disciplined. They played better defense. All those things are true. And I don't want to take anything away from Miami because they're just an incredible story. I'm just enjoying it so much. But if you're the Celtics, you just imploded. Like in the fourth quarter, you things start to go bad and you just start jacking up threes. And it's like, again, we're doing this? That's the part I didn't understand it. And, when the Heat was trailing in that game 6, I was watching Butler and I was watching Iggy. Iguodala is one of my favorite players. He's everybody's favorite player. So tough, so smart, so clever. And you thought earlier in the series, like, well, I don't know, maybe he doesn't fit in this series. Spo wasn't playing him very much. He looked a little rusty. I mean, think about it. He didn't play most of the year. And then all of a sudden you watch them when they're down. And they don't panic. They don't do anything but just dig a little deeper, make an extra pass, make the right play. Patience. Patience is the sign of a veteran elite team. And there was no patience when it came to Boston. And that surprised me because I feel like they've been around long enough that they should understand that. And they didn't.
I rewatched the fourth quarter, which was awful watching it live and was even worse on a rewatch. They completely fell apart. I mean, people know they were up 96-90 and the Heat go on like a 35-5 run, but the Heat scored on 10 straight possessions. Yeah. They did everything they wanted, and you can visibly see the Celtics kind of falling apart and shrinking from the moment. And what was frustrating to me, and then hearing after, it's like, well, they're a young team. It's first of many times. It's like, are they a young team? Because they have 2 veterans that they're paying combined $60 million a year, Kemba and Hayward, who are at their veteran peaks, who are supposed to be the experienced guys for these situations. Tatum and Brown. Brown's been in 3 conference finals. Tatum, this was his second. He went toe-to-toe with LeBron. Smart's been in a bunch of big games. He's probably played 70, 75 playoff games at this point. And you look at Miami on the other side, it's like, what game has Hero been in? What game has Duncan Robinson been in? What big playoff games has Bam been in? Why is the Celtics the young team? I just think the Miami was tougher and better coached. And it was a tough Stevens series. It really was. He got, I thought Nurse took it to him in round 2 in a lot of ways. And that series probably shouldn't have gone 7. And then this series, like Spo definitely always had this extra something to bring to the table every game.
Well, and I thought too, just he went with Tice, and Tice was he had a really good year, underrated, doesn't make any money, gets every foul called on him. It's unbelievable. Doesn't matter. And when he gets hammered going to the basket, I have some sympathy for him. But in this game, in that fourth quarter, you could not play him.
Yeah.
When Grant Williams was on the floor, I think they were a plus 24 or something crazy. That might be the wrong number.
Switch on D, all that
stuff.
I mean,
just Grant Williams should have been in the game. And I think Brad knew it. And again, it's, Hayward did not have it clearly in that game. And that also hurt. I felt they went with Hayward too long. He just was having, and listen, I will, and people don't like to make excuses for players if they're hurt or not. I don't agree with that. I think Hayward came back 3 weeks too early, and he did it because the team needed him, and he knew he should play. I remember early on, right after he had that injury, one of the things that happened to him was one of the nerves got irritated in his ankle. He was in excruciating pain for the first week after that happened, aside from all the other ligament damage and everything else. So he got it out. He came back, and, Mark Jackson kept saying on the broadcast, well, if you're out there, I don't want to hear about it. No excuses. Well, come on. That to me isn't quite right. And Gordon Hayward probably shouldn't have been playing. But when he was ineffective, then you got to take him out, and you got to stop going to him. So that's
been Stevens' blind spot for the last 3 years. My dad and I have talked about this endlessly, and my dad was here this weekend. It's almost like the high school coach and his son, where the coach can't look at it rationally or objectively at all. And Hayward has had these moments the last 3 years where it's just clear he wasn't right on the court for different reasons, right? He came back from the terrible injury, and there were times he just didn't look comfortable and aggressive and anything. When he came back from the broken hand this year, he didn't look right for a while, and Stevens was just going to ride him and really trusted him, and he trusts him because of shit that goes way back to Butler. But in this game, it wasn't the game for him. You could see it when he's missing layups and stuff like that. It's like, it's out.
That was like, wow. But I think it was because I watched it. I rewatched that because I was trying to figure out, I don't know if you noticed it, he had no lift on the layup.
Nothing.
That's what it was. I don't think he could jump.
Right.
For real. So I'm, now.
Are you sure he's going to opt in?
Oh, come on. Who's going to pay him $32 million?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying they opt out, do the long, because we've seen that a couple times in recent years where the guy opts out and takes 85 for 4, something like that.
He might. That's a possibility. The Celtics, and you've got this injury history now, which everyone gets mad at me. Gordon Hayward fans, they're like, injury history. I'm like, well, he has been injured. I mean, they're freak injuries. I get that. But it doesn't change the fact that he hasn't been able to fulfill his contract with Boston. It's very unfortunate, and it is related to injury. And I feel for the guy. But if you're the Celtics, do you want to have him opt out and extend him for how long? I don't know. Like, I think they believe in him. I do think Danny and Brad still believe in Gordon Hayward. And to be honest, so do I. When he's healthy, I believe in him too, because what he did this year when he was healthy doesn't get talked about enough. Think about it. Gordon Hayward in Utah is your main option. He's a 20-point a game scorer. He's a volume scorer, and he's important to you. And then he comes to Boston. You're thinking maybe he could do that. Then he gets hurt, and all these things happen. These young guys come. So this year, what did he do? He had very few touches, really, when you think about it. And he maximized them with really quite good efficiency. And he was the best facilitator they had on the floor. He really was. He made plays, and often he didn't always get the assists. There was the hockey assists, the Gretzky assists sometimes. But so I admire what he did this year. He never complained about it. He fit in a way that I'm sure was not how he envisioned it when he came to Boston. He's like, all right, well, this is what I have to do to contribute to the team, and he did. And I think the players appreciated it, because if you were Jaylen Brown, for instance, a year earlier, and you're like, man, what do I have to do to get my minutes and get my shots?
Yeah.
If I'm Jaylen Brown, by the way, I'm still thinking that after the series. He was my favorite Celtic from start to finish. He was awesome. Think about what he did. He guarded Adebayo. He guarded Hero. He guarded Dragic. He guarded Bam in some situations. I'm leaving people out. Duncan Robinson.
He's turned it into McHale for this. Not that Tatum's Bird, but there's definitely a Bird-McHale dynamic
100%.
with them, where there were games where McHale was the best guy on the floor, but it was always the Bird shadow. I think people gravitate to Tatum when they watch the team, but Jalen's the most reliable guy they have.
Well, he was in this series for sure. And offensively, he was too, those corner threes. And again, so I love Marcus Smart. I've watched that kid. I've covered, I feel like, almost every game he's ever played in since he got here. I've watched him go from a kid that couldn't even hit the rim when he was taking threes, NBA threes, to really turn himself into a very serviceable, solid offensive player. And we know that he's just, otherworldly defensively. So I'm the president of his fan club, but he took 22 shots in game 6. Kemba took 15, and I think Jaylen Brown took 17. That doesn't work. That doesn't work.
Listen, you could just go look at games where Smart has taken like 19 shots or more, 10 threes or more. Yeah. It's never good.
No.
And when they're at their best, it's always like he's got 9 points, 9 rebounds, 8 assists, 2 steals, 8 shots, something like that. He doesn't see it. I do wonder, I think this is a pivotal summer for them. And I know it's a pivotal summer for anybody, but this is really the last year that they have some roster options, because Tatum's going to get the max, super max, whatever the hell he ends up with. Brown's locked in. Kemba's making $30 million a year. Hayward is in the last year of his deal. So it's either he's going to be an expiring contract heading into this last season, or you redo the deal for less. They have the Tice Cantor thing to figure out. They have a $5.7 million exemption. They're going to be over the tax for the next 5 years.
Yeah, no matter what.
And they have 3, I don't know, I think they have like 14, 22, and 26, something like that. But if there was ever a year for them to make a move, if they loved a guy in the top 7 in the draft, or
this is it. Yeah.
If they wanted to use Hayward's contract with all of their picks to go after somebody else, if they wanted to trade Kemba and Tice for Porzingis, like whatever the big monster.
Good luck,
move
Bill.
is.
That's never happening, my friend. Never happening. No. Never
Porzingis, maybe declining stock. But I do think. I think they're very aware.
You're still a Celtics fan at heart, aren't you?
I think they're very aware this is the pivotal summer, because they kind of blew it last summer. They really did. They when you think about like the last 2 rounds, Williams was the only draft pick who played even a little, and he barely played. I mean, he made 2 threes the whole Miami series. And it was a pretty good draft. There were a lot of good dudes in there, and they kind of whiffed.
Right. No, all that is true. It's interesting that Ball was in Boston. Someone saw him. Someone from the Lawrence Eagle Tribune somehow saw him. He was in Boston.
Lonzo Ball?
No. LaMelo.
LaMelo Ball was in Boston?
Yeah, he was. And the word on the street was that he was working out for the Celtics, or was visiting with the Celtics. So I don't know what to make of that. It's not my report. Some eagle eye from the Lawrence Eagle Tribune found out about that. I thought that was very interesting.
I think there's trade-up potential for them, because the teams in the top 7 are not necessarily 100% delighted with being in the top 7. Maybe they'll love somebody. But you look at a team like the Pistons. Pistons have the 7th pick. They probably have the most barren talent roster in the league. They're tied to Blake and Drummond, Luke Kennard. The rookie they took last year was pretty good, but for the most part, they kind of need young guys and to take swings. And this is a draft where if you get past like the 10th pick, you can take swings. You might end up with the Bam Adebayo type of end of the lottery, post lottery kind of
Pascal Siakam.
Yeah. So I think this is a draft where if you love somebody in the top 7, you could potentially move up with picks and some other stuff.
Yeah. So they've got the Memphis' 14th pick. Their own pick, I think, is 26, and then they have Milwaukee's pick, which is 30 in the first round.
That's what.
And then they have Brooklyn's pick in the second round. So they do have some options. It'll be interesting to see. I think the Gordon Hayward decision is an interesting one. I do think they still believe in him. Your point's a good one. They may just do that, have him opt out and spread it out over 3 or 4 years.
Or you have him opt out, spread it out, and you trade him to Indiana for Miles Turner. And if you're the Haywards, you're like, Boston was a nightmare. Everything went wrong from day one. Fresh start. We're back home.
Yeah.
And then if you're Boston, you're like, hey, Miles Turner, on a good night, kind of like him. But
I'd rather have Sabonis. I love Sabonis.
Can you get Sabonis? I love Sabonis as well. All right, let's talk about a couple final storylines. One is Miami. Bam said it in the post-game interview after Game 6. This is the reason I love them heading into the bubble, why I love them heading into the playoffs, and why I kind of like them as a sneaky finals pick. Haven't decided if I'm picking them yet. I'll announce it somewhere before Wednesday night. They're a chip on the shoulder team. Bam said it. He said, every guy in this roster is mad about something. Felt like they were undervalued, underappreciated, didn't get their just due, had to fight for what they got. those are the type of teams that win the title. And they've been compared to the 2004 Pistons a little bit over the last few weeks. I think it's a really good comparison, not from a style of play, but when you look at the mechanics and the personality of that Pistons team and what made them succeed, it was all of these dudes who had just this incredible amount to prove.
They did.
Which reminds me of the Miami team.
But they were nastier. Well, Rasheed is so nasty, but I guess Jimmy Butler matches him for nastiness, The rest of those guys, Ben Wallace, he was nasty.
Right. Well, it's a different era for the league, too. It was a way more physical team than what we have now.
But, that's not a bad comparison. I just the thing about them that interests me when I watch them is, like, Tyler Hero in that game the other night, he got stripped. I think it was Jaylen Brown. Did Jaylen Brown strip him? I think it was Jaylen Brown.
Tyler Hero got stripped 2 times, yeah.
Right, and he's looking at the referee. He's staring down the referee like he's been in the league 5 years. And I'm like, yo, kid, what are you doing?
Yeah, he's 20.
But I love it. I love it, but I'm like, whoa, there's an edge to him that I don't think we've even scratched the surface of yet. I really don't. And he's the one that he just amazes me. I didn't watch Miami enough. I wish I had watched them more. I would have understood how important he is.
Dragic is another one who has that kind of fire to him that he's had dating back to Phoenix when he was Nash's caddy for like probably too many years, but could come in and swing playoff games and carried himself almost like the type of player that would kill America in the Olympics in like 2004. Right. Well, he had that kind of vibe to him.
Manu Ginobili, for instance. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I was thinking about him too, because they don't finish games with him, as you know. He's usually not like the end of the game. They're going with Iggy. And this guy's been so important to them. And they show him on the sidelines and he's screaming and cheering for everyone. Like, that's the other thing. There's no, at least that I can see, internal drama about who's playing and who isn't. Like, Kelly Olynyk didn't play at all the last 2 games. Derek Jones plays important minutes and then you don't ever see him again. That reminds me a little bit of what Malone was doing with the Nuggets. I liked it, like he leaned on PJ Dozier in that one game, and PJ Dozier was amazing. Then he was a DMP the next game, and that tells me when you can do that, that tells me that there's just an understanding within your group and with your coaching staff about how this is going to work. And we have no time for any of the histrionics that are going to go on about playing time or shots or who gets this or who gets that. I think that's really important too. Because, Anthony Davis, in some of those Laker games, he was getting really frustrated. Like, give me the ball. How come I'm not getting the ball? I thought that was interesting.
Well, especially his reaction after the game winner where he was kind of angry.
Yeah,
and it kind of had this attitude like, I can do this all the time.
Right.
I said this on Sunday, and I wanted to throw this at you. One of the reasons I think Miami has a real chance in this series is they are not going to be deferential to LeBron at all. And I think what we've seen in these playoffs especially, and really all season, and it's mainly because of everything LeBron's built as one of the greatest players ever, his stature, the fact that he's going against dudes who grew up idolizing him. Like Michael Porter's covering him, and Michael Porter's like, I've been playing this guy in video games since I was like 8 years old. Like, I can't believe I'm guarding LeBron. And I do think teams were really deferential to him, especially Denver. I was shocked by, they just let him waltz up the court. He's basically playing point guard. They're not pressuring him at all. He's 35 years old. They're not making a move. They're not trash talking him. They're not hard fouling him and staring at him for an extra second. And he was just the alpha dog of that series in so many ways. I think Miami's going to approach it completely differently. I think they're going to be trying to mess with him, get in his head. They're going to be really physical. When he's bitching at the refs, they're going to be bitching at him to shut up and play. Yeah, and they're not going to be differential at all. And I actually think that's the way it has to be if you're trying to beat them.
Well, you're right about one thing. The one thing you have to try to do to beat LeBron James is tire him out. You got to make him work on the defensive end. You got to, and that's what San Antonio did so beautifully all the way back in 2014. That's how they beat the Heat, was they kept moving the ball, which Miami can do. And it requires you to recover. And it's exhausting to do that, especially when you're 35.
Yeah.
And I will say this though, in that game, the clinching game, he took that game by the throat the first 2 minutes, and he never let go. I thought it was one of the best wire-to-wire games he might have ever had.
Agree.
And I say that because he was shooting. I expect him to drive and score. I expect that all the time. He's been playing good defense all year, consistently, really been engaged defensively. But he was hitting perimeter shots and threes. That I never expect that with consistency, because his career totals tell us we shouldn't expect that. And so I just thought that was an unbelievable performance. And if he plays like that, nobody's going to beat the Lakers. I
don't see him being able to do that in this series because of.
Well, I think you're right, because Butler obviously doesn't put anybody on a pedestal. And Iggy, let's remember, Iggy's got a pretty good history with this guy. Iggy's old, he's old. All right, let's agree we're both old and we've both been here before. And I bother you from time to time.
Well, and then you have Crowder, who's like, you gave up on me in 40 games when we played together.
Yeah,
and he's going to be completely fired up to and then you also have the Bam piece too. It's the bummer of the Clippers not making round 3 was they had so many ways to defend him.
Right.
And LeBron got through the first 3 rounds and was awesome, but also played 3 teams that were perfect for him, right? Portland's got Hazonia.
Right. It's too bad Trevor Ariza couldn't have played. He might have I'm not saying he would have stopped LeBron, but at least he would have made 5 fouls. He's a body. Yeah.
So all of a sudden we're now in this Miami series where they have all these dudes to throw at him. The matchup that is going to be really tough for Miami is Davis.
So can Bam handle that? Yeah.
If he's healthy. And Bam, the Celtics were never able to get him in foul trouble, test him really in any way. He was always out there. He was always able to play 40 minutes, basically doing whatever he wanted. And we knew going into that series, he was going to be that him and Dragic were the 2 worst matchups. Right. That was borne out. I think when I look at what Miami brings to the table against the Lakers, the Dragic hero factor with the Lakers guards, they're just not going to be able to guard those guys if they're playing well. The fact that Robinson can move so well around screens and whoever is chasing him around, that's going to be tough. I'm not sure they're going to have to figure out how to hide LeBron. They might even have to play some zone. But on the flip side, LeBron loves hunting these dudes and man-to-man, getting people in pick and roll and switches. And Miami's just going to play that zone. And they're going to be like, cool.
Yeah, that's right.
This is what we're doing. Beat this. And we've seen teams over the years have been able to get in LeBron. This is the way to beat him is throw something different at him, make him try to solve it. And when he can't solve it, then he's not LeBron anymore. Dallas being the most famous example of that. So do you see that zone working against him, or am I being too optimistic for Miami?
No, I think there's a chance it will, especially because his supporting cast, I'm still not convinced they can. I just can't believe a team that shoots the ball as inconsistently as the Lakers do from the 3-point line can win a championship, especially in this day and age where 3-point shooting is at a premium. And I was on, one of the shows with Fizdale, and he was like, no, they're a good 3-point shooting team. And I'm like,
no, they're not.
Are they? Man, I don't see it. Now playoff Rondo is shooting 42% from the 3-point line. Do you realize that? He shot 42%.
All of them were wide open, though, right?
But
so he's 4 out of 10 on wide open threes. Yeah.
I still can't believe it. And see, here's the thing about playoff Rondo. So every coach is like, okay, you could slack off of him, contest late, and use him to double. Like the way I know Rondo, I'm sure the way you know Rondo, do it at your own peril, man. I'm telling you, that goes into his blood, and he's like, yeah, all right, watch me. So it's funny to think that Rondo at his age could be an X factor for the Lakers, but he has the experience. He's not afraid of anybody. He'll get up in the grill of those young players. He'll be insulted that anybody thinks Hero or Duncan Robinson should even be mentioned in the same breath as him. Like he really will be like that. He can froth himself into a lather. Now, can the other guys? I don't know. Caruso and Kuzma, like what do they get out of those guys? That could, to me, have a lot to depend on what happens in this series, because Davis is going to be great. But Davis, to me, is just an odd player. I mean, obviously he's incredibly talented, and his numbers, but I don't think his numbers in this postseason truly explain him. I think there's been periods where you're like, well, where's Davis? I mean,
I agree.
No rebounds into the fourth quarter twice. Twice.
But you're supporting casting. There was that moment when Davis made the game winner.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And that was a tight game.
Great shot.
Got swung, but 2 plays before that gets swung to Caruso. Game on the line, wide open. And I was like, he's not making that. He short-armed it. But they ended up the rebound. They got out of bounds. They were able to whatever.
Yeah.
There's going to be a moment like that in the finals. And we have seen over and over again, it's the Carusos that decide these finals sometimes.
Or
Yeah.
the heroes. And don't you think Heroes thinks pretty sure he's going to make every shot he's ever taken in his life?
That's the case for Miami, though, because and you saw it in game 6, right? This is why I was so worried about Miami against Boston series. This is why I thought they're going to beat them. You can outplay them, and they'll have this random quarter where Iggy hits 4 threes in a quarter, where Hero scores 17 points and a half, where Dragic scores 10 points in a minute, where Butler all of a sudden is getting to the free throw line and hitting a 3, and you're like, Jesus, he's the best player in the league.
Right.
It's always somebody else with them, which to me lends itself to this is a team that could be a finals team. My fear for them would be Davis destroys them. Right. I actually think they're going to be. LeBron's not going to do what he did in the Denver series. Like LeBron will be great, but I just don't think he'll be able to be peak LeBron 35, 10, and 10 every night. That's not going to happen against this Miami team. Davis is the guy for them in this series.
We haven't talked about the real gentleman in the room, which is Pat Riley. I mean, isn't that just the best part of this whole thing? It's just the best part of it. I mean, when you look back on Pat Riley, who had this impeccable reputation, and he moves mountains to get those 3 guys there, and they have an agreement. I think it was 4 years, right? Am I right about this? And then they come back at the 11th hour after it's all been announced and say, yeah, we need that next year. And he's like, if I do this, I have to trade away players and picks, just so you understand, to afford this. So don't come back to me and say we don't have enough because you want this extra year. So am I clear on this? And they're like, yeah. And then he leaves, So would you just look back on that, the betrayal that Pat Riley must have felt, and has shared it with, my good friend Ian Thompson wrote a book called The Soul of Basketball. There's some great stuff from Riley in there about LeBron James, really great quotes from Riley about how, he had to finally just let go of it. Well, now I think he's going to go back into his closet and dig out those old memories and grab hold of it and put it in the middle of the locker room, like they used to do with the Heat when they had that weird thing with the bowl and all the messages in it.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, he's a great motivator. If you, some guys don't buy into it, but I just keep thinking. I can't stop thinking about Pat Riley during this whole thing. I can't.
It's my favorite subplot of it. Him and Spo together, because I remember I was on TV that year in the playoffs when they were, imploding against the Spurs. And I always felt like it was, as that finals went along, especially after Cleveland won the lottery, that it was in play. And everyone's like, no way, he hates Gilbert. He'll never go back. But LeBron, one of the reasons he's in the running for greatest player of all time at this point is he's so smart. He knew he didn't have it with that Miami roster anymore. He knew Wade wasn't the same guy. Right. He knew it was going to be too hard for them to add pieces, paying those 3 guys.
Right.
And they were kind of going to be in the situation they were in.
But that was his fault.
But that was his fault. Totally.
Yeah. Because if they hadn't done the extra year. Yeah, I know. And I always used to tease Pop and those guys in San Antonio, like, you're the reason LeBron left. Because you had to play near perfect basketball over those final 3 games of that series, because that series is 2-1, and they played near perfect basketball over those final 3 games. Like the way they moved the ball, the 0.5, just moving, cutting, moving. That's what made LeBron realize, I guess I'm done. I guess I'm done here. I really believe that.
It's been interesting how people justify years where LeBron didn't win the finals, right? 07 you throw out, because that team, it's amazing they even got there. They had no chance.
Yeah, right.
But those 4 Miami teams were the favorites every single year. They almost went up 2-0 against Dallas. They completely choked in game 2. If they win that game, they probably win the finals that year. 2014, it's not like he was playing with a bunch of schmucks. He had Wade, he had Bosh, he had Ray Allen, he had Haslam. Like that was a pretty good team. The Spurs just haymakered them.
Yeah.
2015, everybody gets hurt. I guess you could throw that one out. 16, miracle comeback, but really they would have lost that if Draymond doesn't stupidly get, the last technical. 17 and 18, that team spent a lot of money. I think they had the highest salary total in the league. And in 17, they had him and Kyrie and Kevin Love, who were allegedly 3 of the 15 best players in the league. And everybody's like, well, he had no chance that year. It's like, I don't think we felt like he had no chance that year. The Warriors just outplayed them, and Durant outplayed LeBron.
Durant. I was going to say, that's all about Durant, though. You add Durant to that mix, and then it's all.
But he played better than LeBron that series. Oh, yeah. So, I don't know. This series, I look at it, and I'm like, they're the favorites. They're almost 4-1 favorites. They have the two best players in the series.
Oh,
and if they lose this, that's a bad one. That's it. You look at 11, you look at 14.
Yeah.
17, I feel like the two sides are relatively equal. They were slight underdogs, whatever. And then 20, they're prohibitive favorites.
Right. But I think that's why they don't lose. I think everything you just said is why they don't lose. I really do think the Lakers will win. I think they just, LeBron to me just looks, I got to tip my hat to him. I've been, from last year to this year, just the way he's changed his mind, it changed the way he approached everything. I mean, it's kind of good that all those young players got traded away for Anthony Davis, because they had a right to be really ticked off at him, honestly.
Yeah.
For, the way he quit on them last year. So this year he's been locked in from the very beginning, and he's like all the great ones. All the great ones do this. All the perceived slights, real and imagined, doesn't matter. I mean, Jordan was the best at it. All these perceived, like he made up that story about the kid from Washington. I mean, that's just like my favorite story. The guy from
LeBradford Smith.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the best story ever. And LeBron does the same thing, real slights, real or imagined. And a lot of times it's the media he uses, whatever he needs to do to get himself all revved up. He's there. And Rondo, I just think Rondo is going to play a part in this, just from, even though he had a horrible regular season. Technically he's too old. He can't shoot. I just think he's going to do something in this series to make a difference.
Who on the Lakers is the odds-on favorite to be the most embarrassing, pretending that they had an awesome relationship with Kobe? Is it too many candidates?
Gosh, I don't even.
Like Dwight Howard was talking about it, pretending Kobe told me once. It's like, Kobe hated you. What are you talking about? Why are you bringing up Kobe? He despised you.
Yeah, he really did. In fact, the Lakers came to town the year that Dwight was playing with them, and I was judicious in my asks with Kobe, because you didn't want to overdo it. But every other year, I guess maybe, they would come to town. We'd have lunch at the Four Seasons, because they always stayed there, which I love, because I love that room and it's beautiful.
And best lunch place in Boston.
Boston Globe and ESPN, one or the other, got to pay for it. It was always good for me. Always had the soup. I loved it. It started with soup. I never start with soup unless my company's paying for it.
Yeah.
Anyway, and so I sat there with Kobe, and I had barely said hello, and he was ready to launch. And he just destroyed Dwight. So yeah, I think pretty much hands down Dwight.
This is my number one reason to root for Miami. I might have to wager on them just for this reason. I can't accept the Dwight redemption story. I just can't.
Yeah.
Dwight Howard, NBA champion, is just torture. I can't handle it.
Well, and he was I know he was effective in that Denver series in spurts, but a lot of the time he was just he was like a caricature,
Yeah.
And the histrionics. And to me, it was somewhat offensive, Yeah, it really was.
Last
and
question I have
Jokic
for you.
pretty much ignored him, Jokic was good enough to ignore him. So
I wish Jokic had gotten mad at him, because it seemed like Dwight was just trying to provoke him.
So here's the thing about Jokic. Like I don't know. You got to accept Jokic for who he is, and you're not going to ever see any of the internal angst, anger, strife. Like, that's part of his gig. Whereas Jamal Murray, everything's there. You can look at Jamal Murray. It's all on his sleeve, his leg, his arm, everything. You can see everything. And someone was saying the other day about, I'd like to see Denver play in a hostile environment next year. I'd like to see them win a Game 7 on the road next year. And I'm like, are you serious? Jamal Murray would be like, bring it
please.
on.
Last question before we go. I felt this way heading into the 2006 finals, and I actually wrote a column about it before the finals, about my biggest fear for that Dallas-Miami series was that the officials were going to have too big of a say one way or the other, because the way Miami was playing, depending on the game that year, it was like you could call Wade you could send the line 17 times or 3. Shaq's impossible.
Right.
And in general, the officiating was just really bad that year. And it was like, it feels like this is going to be a real problem. And then it was obviously the biggest officiating problem they've ever had in the finals.
Yes.
I feel like we're headed for that in this series, because I think they have lost the ability to figure out two things. And the players have been so good at exploiting it. The first thing is somebody like LeBron, when he's driving to the basket, he's just figured out now, I'm going to lurch into the guy and I'm going to create contact.
Right.
The guy's going to be moving, and technically it's a foul every time. But if you're the defender, it's like, well, what am I supposed to do? Just let him drive by me? LeBron's so strong. He go into him. Butler does the same thing. So you have these really strong swing guys have figured out how to create contact. Dragic is another one where they do the stop, coming around a screen, you stop and then you lean into somebody. So that's one piece. And then the second is the 3-point shooting stuff where
I can't
you're
stand
about to
it.
shoot a three, somebody's coming at you, you kick your foot out, you stop, you lean your hip in. And I don't think they know what to do with this stuff anymore. I really don't. And Miami and the Lakers were the two best teams that over and over again, in Toronto a little bit too.
Right.
I feel like it's coming to a head in this series. And I think it's going to be the biggest talking point of the series. What do you think?
Oh, I hope you're wrong. But here's the problem especially with the 3-point stuff, is this. They've already called it a certain way all the way to now. They can't change now. And both coaches know that.
Yeah.
So they're going to tell their guys. And so let's look at the roster and who does it the best. I mean,
Miami does it the best for 3-pointers that I've ever seen.
Well, and Dragic, doesn't he just do it for everything? He's he's another guy that every time he goes down, it's like, I'm like, all right, 1, 2, 3. Yep. He grabbed his face. I mean, it's
like a soccer player.
It's like unbelievable. Yeah. And it's so hard to watch.
He really worked Kemba with some of those. Like that first call he got on Kemba where he has Kemba on his hip and he'll stop for a second and then throw
ridiculous.
that. And Kemba was so frustrated, but it's like, this guy's outwitting you.
He is, yeah. Kemba, one GM told me when the Celtics got Kemba, I was like, wow, I was surprised they could pull that off. I thought it was going to be great for the culture of the locker room, which all that was true. And I think Kemba's, really fun player to watch. And they said to me, yeah, but he's too small. I'm like, well, I don't know. He was third team All-NBA last year. How small is he? And they said, wait till you get to the playoffs. That's when you're going to really understand why his size is really going to hurt him. And that's why Gordon Hayward, again, was so important, because he had size. And if he was healthy, he could use his size appropriately, because the Celtics are small. They're small when you look at it. And Kemba, that was one of the things I think teams exploited was his size or level size in a postseason environment, which I hadn't really given a lot of thought to.
Yeah, so you have Hero, Dragic, Butler on the Miami side, and Robinson too, who's he's
not quite
figuring out little tricks, but he knows some tricks at this point.
Quite as well. Oh, I love him.
So you have them on their side, and then you have Bam, who jumps over everybody's back. He just does it from the beginning on every rebound. They either call it or they don't. And then you have on the Lakers side, you have LeBron, who is just mastered this now.
Yes, he has.
He knows how to get fouls. He works the refs as hard as I think we've ever seen anybody. And then
except for Mikhail.
Yeah, true. You're right. Mikhail's number one. And then you have Dwight, who's just like a bull in a china shop. And I think every game is going to be one team lobbying the refs afterwards for the calls they didn't get. I'm really worried about it. I think it could ruin the series.
Well, see, I think in Dwight's case, though, for the most part, I thought the refs were pretty good about not falling for it. Like I think Dwight he doesn't get street cred like LeBron. I mean, LeBron's earned a lot of that cred. I'll be interested to see, again, with some of these other guys going forward, if you look at the Lakers roster, can Kuzma do something, or is that too much to ask? Caruso can spot shoot, he can hit some shots, but who's who's the one that's going to be like, yeah, he gave you something you weren't expecting? Who's that guy?
And also, what do you do when Miami goes crunch time and they play Dragic and Hero together with Butler, with Iguodala and Bam? Because that's going to be their closing lineup. And you could hide somebody in Iguodala and hope he doesn't make threes. But you still have to chase around Dragic and Hero, which means they're going to have to play two of Caruso, Pope, Rondo. I'm guessing it would be Caruso and Rondo.
I'm guessing that too.
And then Kuzma with LeBron and AD. So now you have Kuzma and Caruso out there in these big moments. I don't trust either of them to make a shot.
Yeah, or to defend. Caruso's a much better defender than people think, but Kuzma, Kuzma's got some holes there. So that'd be interesting to see. I mean, I'm just really glad that Miami is in the finals, because I've loved their run. The way they play the game is so beautiful. I've really enjoyed, and I was glad Denver got their due, because, man, I could sit all day and watch Jokic and Murray run pick and roll for each other. How many bigs and smalls does that ever happen? So I'm glad those guys got a run, and it still feels to me like it's LeBron's year and the Lakers' year, but maybe I'm wrong.
We have to go, but bonus question. What do you expect from Magic Johnson in this series? Because LeBron is basically kind of body LeBron and Pelinka, especially because he threw Pelinka under the bus and said Pelinka was undermining him, all that. And this whole Lakers organization seems like they're shoving Magic to the side. And I don't see him disappearing for 2 weeks. What happens with him?
I don't know. I'll let you know. I've been trying to reach him for the last 3 days.
Yeah, I was going to say, I could see a Jackie Magic story about how hurt he is, that he's been cast aside.
But see, he'll never admit that.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think so.
I'm the reason LeBron came to LA.
But
he's going to grab credit here somewhere.
No, but he'll say, "Oh, Jeannie and I are fine. We had dinner. We broke bread. We're good. I'm part of the family. This is awesome." Yeah, I still think that'll happen.
He will be heard from.
I hope
Jackie,
so. I hope it's me.
This was so much fun to see you. It's such a fun morning talking basketball with you.
This is like a great thing. Yeah, see, for me, it's like almost time for lunch, Bill.
Yeah, all right. Go back. ESPN needs you to put you on 20 shows. So we will see you soon on this one.
Thanks. All right. Take care.